Welcome back to another episode of Cyber Conversations. Today, I am very excited to be joined by Or Mattatia. Or is the co-founder and CPO at Beacon Security. And Beacon have recently been recognized in Rising in Cyber 2026 cohort, which is a very exciting thing, and we will get into all of that in a second. But they've been talking about what an AI native security team actually looks like in practice, and why the old ways of doing SecOps may not work much longer. As we all know, AI is changing cybersecurity so fast, but one of the biggest questions right now is whether security operations themselves are evolving fast enough to keep up. So, first off, all huge congrats on the Rising in Cyber recognition. Obviously, being named in the 2026 cohort is pretty huge, especially given it was voted on by CISOs. Why don't you give us a bit of an introduction to yourself and maybe lay the foundations of what you're doing over at Beacon?
Thanks, Katie, for having me here. It's great to be here. We are really humbled by that recognition for Rising in Cyber. It's an award, but it means a lot to us because it's one that it's given by customers and security leaders. Who are we building for? It's not easy. I think at these points in time, you always get back to the trenches, the harder time, the challenges. So it's really exciting to get that.
No, and I think when you talk about that's what's so exciting about this is the fact that it's not just anybody within the industry, it's the people that are dealing, the security practitioners, the people that are dealing with the challenges day to day. Obviously, it means that there's a huge value in what you're building and you are solving a problem that needs to be solved, right? Because I think in cyber, we've got a few vendors out there that are just solving maybe the luxury problems and not necessarily the absolutely critical ones. Why don't we start from the beginning here before we unpack everything? Because it'd be really interesting to hear what was the inspiration around starting Beacon. Was there somewhere in throughout your career? Because obviously you come from a really hands-on background yourself, where you recognize that there's a gap here, and I think we should be the ones to solve it.
So yeah, a great question. Honestly, it wasn't exactly like that. I think my career started on this elite intelligence unit you keep hearing about 8200, where I was actually an attacker. And I was an attacker for almost 6 years. And that was a lot of fun. And we had those achievements. And as a technologist, it was really interesting to get into all these places and spaces. I always wanted to be on the other side. So I switched sides and I joined the Israeli to do cyber defense, to do nation state defense. And that was a lot harder, actually. It was a lot harder. Yeah, we were doing incident response and malware analysis and threat hunting and reverse engineering. And we kept feeling that we were losing, not because we did a bad job. I think we were doing like a decent job. We were finding those malicious actors, finding that malware, hunting for things. We found some things and then we handled them. However, while we were doing that, we got attacked in so many other places. So we had to develop this big data for defense strategy, like how you do more with less. It was more than a decade ago, right? So we did not have the AI tooling we have today, but we did understand that we have to be selective on what data we inspect, what data we collect. The first problem is you don't have data. The second problem is, oh shit, I have too much data. What do I do with that? Like, how do I analyze it? How do I get insights from it? So I think a lot of the ideas that we had back then about data pipelining, being selective with data, understanding the value of logs, telemetry, understanding that security data can exist in many forms and shapes. It's not just logs. I think these concepts really resonate today with us at Beacon. I was definitely on the other side. I was a defender, and I always wanted to build something that I could use that could solve my problems as a defender. So I think, and a lot happened in between, but I'm really proud to be at this time and this place, to be building for my past self and my colleagues in the industry. That it's really an uphill battle. It's really hard to defend organization, especially in the age of AI.
Yeah.
So I'm really humbled to just be part of the good side.
I think sometimes the people that can have the most insight and really bring so much value to the good side, as you call it, are the people that have been on the other side. When you can see both sides of the coin, it's much easier to really recognize, okay, if you were to think like an attacker, then where do you go as a defender? And I think it's a real superpower. But there's one thing that you talk about is we're exploring like a decade ago, we may not have had the AI models and the AI technology we have right now, but the problem has always been data. And I think something that's really interesting that you've talked about before is the fact that the real challenge isn't actually within the AI models and all this new tech that we've got coming. At the foundations, it's still the data and context underneath them where the challenge is. Why is that? And what made you realize that it's great that we've got all of this new tech, but this is still the problem and we just haven't solved it yet?
So there's this famous saying that security is a data problem, and I think as defenders, we've always felt that it's like true. And our understanding, together with Gal and Ido, my co-founders, who are amazing people, and all of us are like this intersection of like data and AI and cybersecurity. I think we were developing this understanding of data is just not being solved in security. The entire approach is broken. The entire paradigm of how do I do data in cybersecurity land is broken, and we need to develop like a new approach. So when we build Beacon, we're thinking about from first principles, how do you build like the modern stack, like the modern data stack for security. A lot of the components that we use in like data, not in like cybersecurity, are like missing in security. We had those for decades. We have those centralized sims that were the beating heart of the security program, and we were trying as defenders. It was always like a cat and mouse game to always be collecting something that you need. And the integrations always broke, and the pipelines were always not really fully monitored. And we were always collecting too much data, and we were flooding, and we were paying so much for data that we don't really use. At the same time, we were starving for the critical data that actually helps us solve security problems. And I think just using the tooling that we had, we never had a chance at defending our organizations with the tooling that we had and with the approach that we had, because the collect and store is just broken. It does not fit for the age of cloud, the age of SaaS, and definitely not for the age of AI. You need something which is more continuous, more adaptive. So, attackers, they move at machine speed, and they now harness AI in ways like crazy ways. We can't even imagine what type of leverage they get from just sending fleets of agents on you. If something works, it works. If not, then they try again. And as defenders, we now have to harness AI in a more controlled way. We need to make sure it does not hallucinate. We need to make sure it's effective. We need to make sure that we can actually trust the results. We need to make sure it's running in a safe and controlled environment to increase enterprise adoption. So we have a lot of constraints and a lot of requirements we need to meet in order to really have the amazing intelligence working for us. And I think we're not there yet. And it really connects, because if you solve data problems, then you'll be able to solve security problems with AI in a better way, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's ultimately, you literally mentioned something at the start there when data is always going to be the underlying problem because it's also the thing that we're protecting. That's the thing that if people are getting hold of, that's what you're done for then. But you talked about something in the middle of that that I wanted to circle back to, because when we talk about the fact that attackers have been able to get a hold of this technology, and I often talk about the fact that they don't have to work within the ethical parameters that we do when it comes to refinement, innovation, etc. If we look at the fact that attackers basically got a pure upgrade from AI, it's faster, cheaper, more adaptive, we don't really have the full scope of how advanced they've been able to get with this technology yet, because we probably haven't been able to recognize it. But why do you think defenders could feel behind right now? Is there anything in terms of where we just haven't been able to catch up? Do you think we're more caught up than we realize?
Yeah, great question. So it's actually a question I ask security leaders. So we do a lot of CISO dinners, and we meet a lot of customers always, and we do a lot of conferences and roadshows. And it's a question I always ask security leaders. Do you feel that AI is more advantageous for defenders or for attackers? And unfortunately, they always say for attackers. And I think the reason is that AI is really helping us in various tedious tasks. It's automating triage, and it's doing some alerts aggregation. It's helping us with those playbooks and runbooks. So it's definitely helpful. However, as personal builders, we're seeing how powerful it is. You build products in hours, you solve problems in days. And then when you get back to your enterprise environment, to your day job as a security defender, as a security engineer, analyst, and so on, you see that you can't really do that. And I think that the reason is first, scale, and second, accuracy. And what do I mean by scale? Agents, they have a limited context window, right? So you can't just tell them, okay, scan terabytes of data yourself and find the attacker. It will not work. When the entire data layer is broken, and many organizations don't have a good grasp of what data do they have, what data is useful for what types of use cases, how to collect it, how to fetch it. this new AI tool that someone just onboarded yesterday, how do we get visibility on it? What's in my SIM? Why do I have 60% of my quota just a firewall log that I'm not even using? And why do I have 30% just for compliance because the team said it's important for compliance? And why do all logs have different languages, different formats, different schemas? So when the data layer is broken, we can't really meet the scale, we can't really address the scale problem. However, when we do have a proper data layer and we do have this understanding of the value of secure data, we do have this data catalog, we're then able to serve agents with the fresh and right data. So I think that's the scale problem that we're seeing firsthand today in the field with customers. The second is really the accuracy and fidelity. We definitely don't want to produce a report about an incident with information that we're not sure is accurate. So it's a lot more than just telling Claude Code, analyze this for me, right? We need to have EVA loops, and we have to have golden sets, and we have to LLM judges, and we have to have an iterative, self-improving system that understands security and understands data, understands attackers, understands defenders in a way that we get an output that is more accurate in a way.
Yeah, I think you break that down in a really great way, to be fair. And I think there's something else that I want to ask in addition to this, because when we talk about things like AI native security operations, I think it'd be really interesting to also see what actually changes in how security teams are operating day to day. Because I think, as an extension of what you're talking about there, obviously we can see the gap in almost how these guys are advancing with technology while the others maybe aren't, or are just not to the same pace. And again, I think that's unfortunately like the handcuffs that you get tied to when you have to be on the ethical side of things. But what actually changes when security teams are operating day to day if they're in an actual AI native security ops?
So we definitely see the shift, and many security teams are now becoming security building teams. And we're seeing the shift from security engineers to security builders, for example. And I'll speak about that in just a moment. But when you have an AI native security team, it means that your team can really build in the age of AI. It's not just about doing analyst work, just triaging alerts. And it does not mean to also be using AI, right? And the teams that are just using AI to automate something, to rephrase something, to investigate something, are behind the teams that now understand the new role that is now emerging of a security builder. It's like a new identity because we were always stitching things together and analyzing and applying our security logic and expertise. And now we have a new identity that we need to assume and we need to learn a new profession. And we definitely don't want to forget the old one because it's super important. In order to be great defenders, we need to still be engineers and analysts, but we need to have this builder thing. And when you have security builders and when they have the right tooling, so intelligence is really abundant, it's only getting better and better, right? We have access, most of us have access to frontier AI models, and it's amazing. When you combine that with a data layer and a context layer, and when you have a system that's really you're able to monitor it and reason with it and get results that you can then measure, you can then score, and then you have a loop. I think this is like the basis of a native security team. The difference in results is quite amazing, and we're seeing that with customers. We're seeing customers who are just in endless alert fatigue, still trying
Yeah.
to do the cat and mouse thing, and we're seeing other teams that with just a handful of engineers, they were able to solve so many problems from themselves using the AI native stack. So it's quite amazing. And honestly, it's also satisfying. It's just satisfying to learn a new profession and then to master it and then to be able to do your job better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, that's the point, right? It's being able to be more efficient and do your job better. And again, I always talk about the fact that the point of having this technology is to be able to make sure that humans are doing the human part more than the stuff that could be done through like an agent or just automated through AI as well. What I also think is really interesting though is what do you think separates companies that are genuinely becoming AI native versus companies that are layering AI into existing workflows? Because I think there's a bit of a misconception for a lot of people that just because they're using AI, they think that they can use that terminology of being AI native, but in reality, that's just not the case.
So we definitely feel that at Beacon. A few years ago, we were all phrasing emails with ChatGPT and we were coding some lines with a Copilot thing. And so that's like AI assisted, but it's definitely not AI native. I think it speaks about an approach where you have intelligence that is more autonomous,
Yeah.
an intelligence that is able to really self improve. And it's also an approach, it's also a process where the entire team, not just the developers, like the go to marketing team, the product, the research, the customer success, they all now think in a different way. It's not about how do I do it myself and then have some AI automate the tedious task, but how do I delegate and what do I delegate? And what can I do as a person, as a human being that's expert in my job to delegate more and more of my day work to fleets of agents and how these agents interact with themselves.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is that it really blurs the lines between roles, right? Because at Beacon, our product designer, she no longer uses just Figma. She does the entire cycle. She can write specs and she pushes code to production. She writes PRs, our designer, right? And definitely our development team, because they're so business oriented and they understand the problems and they've been there and some of them have been the failure themselves. So definitely they can understand the problem in a way that they can write the spec. Right. So I think that this is one area that gets blurred. And the way we think at Beacon is when we build products, it's not about the old approach of we have discovery and then we have specking and then we have design. It's 8 people in a process that takes weeks. We think about it more as like we have those AI pods. So we have multidisciplinary teams that work really together in an integrated way. And most of the team members can do all of the team's work themselves. But it's more of a question like who does what based on context, passion, tooling, timelines. So it's more dynamic. And I think a lot of achieving that is really releasing some of your ego, right? Because if you're holding it really tight, I'm writing specs because I'm a product manager and I will not have anybody else writing specs. And I will definitely not code myself because I'm a product manager. I think if you still have that approach, it will be really hard for you to be part of an AI native organization.
I think it's really important what you're talking about there as well, because actually, one thing that I think is becoming more and more present, especially from somebody who spends a lot of time in the recruitment part of this industry, the biggest skill set demand really are people that can be quite versatile in what they do. They don't get pigeonholed into a role anymore, especially in the startup space, which, let's be honest, in cyber is pretty big right now. We're getting people popping up left, right, and center in terms of, hey, there's a new problem and we're here to solve it, because the innovation level is just so high, because the threat landscape is just evolving and expanding so much. So it's very much needed, but that's definitely a critical thing. And one big conversation that people are continuously having are, okay, not only if we don't learn to embrace this new technology, are you maybe going to get lost and get left behind, but also if you can't fully recognize that, okay, more than ever, this has become about collaboration and supporting in different avenues and different capacities than ever before, because also the headcount doesn't always need to be as high as it used to be. People used to have engineering teams that were huge, whereas now actually you can just have a really small agile team that all know how to support and work with each other while leveraging this incredible technology that we're getting come through at an unprecedented rate as well. What I want to make sure we dig into as well here, because we've referenced this a few times and we've obviously talked about the foundations of Beacon, but why don't you talk to us a little bit more as like, where does Beacon actually fit into all of this? What are you actually doing that are helping teams become better?
Amazing. So Beacon is the AI native SecOps stack. What this means is that we've layered what defenders need in order to defend their organization. It starts with data movement, as I mentioned. At the core of our platform is a data pipeline, a secure data pipeline, which is really robust. It's petabyte scale, cross cloud, cross region, bring your own cloud, SaaS. I think that the team here, which is amazing, I think they built the most comprehensive data pipeline in the industry. And that's the basis, and it allows customers that have different kinds of security programs to get value on day one. I'll give examples. First, our pipeline is enabling dramatic cost saving because we're collecting so much data that is redundant. And we've embedded, using security researchers, a lot of expertise and strategies around how to wrangle data and how to optimize it in a way that does not sacrifice fidelity. So when you plug Beacon into your sources, cloud, SaaS, AI, data centers, you name it, and then you route the data into your SIM or data lake, you get cost saving, you get free space. We're always hitting the quota, so you get just more space to get the right data inside. So that's one thing that happens in day one. And then we're doing a lot of schema normalizations, which may sound like not super exciting, but for us, it's really exciting because it means that the pipeline knows security. We understand what's happening there. It's not just a log, it's not just a JSON that we transfer. We really understand the entities and what's happening in the event. And SIMs need that in order to really apply their content, apply their detection. So we do a lot of schema modifications, wrangling changes, and we do that automatically, which is really cool. Then we're enabling SIM migrations. So customers who want to migrate from this specific tool to another tool, or maybe simultaneously using Beacon route data to two different places. So we're enabling all that. For the first time in history, security teams have the ultimate control over their data and schemas. What do I have? And Beacon really, we proactively discover data in organizations. So we'll tell you, hey, Katie, we just found out that you have Zoom in your organization. And as there's some sensitive recording there, but we're not seeing it in your Splunk. We're not seeing it in your Splunk. And maybe with Beacon, you should be collecting it because there are these types of attacks that you won't be able to surface without that. So there's a lot of continuous movement around what should I be collecting and to where. And if it's for compliance, we'll send it to cloud storage or to Beacon Lake. And if it's something that you actually need for day-to-day detection and response, we'll send it to where you do analytics. So I think that's the data foundation. And once we built that, we found out, so we plugged our own agents into the data layer. And what we found out is that they do amazingly better job than without that. So for various security use cases, right? Hunting, logging coverage, investigation, we found out that once they're plugged into this intelligence layer about data, they can get the data they need, not waste tokens, be more efficient, and just do their job a faster, cheaper way. So we've built this entire ecosystem for agents. And the reason why it was easier for us to deliver that was because from day one, we optimized on really the infrastructure, the core data problems, and our customers, the user personas were the security engineers. And they really helped us. They kept us honest and they challenged us and they turned Beacon into this beast, which is great for builders and developers. So we support various types of how you would harness this data layer for security. And it really is able to embed that within developer flows and so on. For agent, it was like a welcoming environment because they can really use MCP or Beacon CLI or talk with our agents. We have workflows. We have a system to really control what agents are doing and what they're not doing. So to increase safety and security. And we enable this whole ecosystem because we believe that from the get-go that this is the modern day to do security. The modern day to do security would be to plug in intelligence with the right content, the right data, the right context. We defenders, we bring the intent. The intelligence is really amazing. We now have Opus 4.7. Who knows what's Opus 7.4 going to be like? But it's going to be amazing. And we don't need a lot more. We don't need a lot more. We just need a proper stack to harness that. And Bickel is building an agent harness specifically for SecOps. So that's
Yeah.
something I'm really proud of.
Something you should be really proud of, because ultimately when you break that down to the absolute foundations, one thing that I think is always a problem within the industry is that the biggest challenges are that people don't know where the gaps are in terms of what data is going where and how is it secure and what's not secured, because especially when you have heavily remote workforces, how do you know what people are using, where they're storing that information and so on. So then to get the visual element there, but then also have it's so many people can say here's the problem, but then it's that follow-up of and this is how we can solve it in a seamless way that then doesn't add 5 extra steps to every single employee's day to day, because then that's where it also doesn't work, because whoever's role it may be, half the time if they're not in security, they don't want the 5 extra layers. They're going to be like, nah, what does it matter if I don't do it? And then ultimately that's where it matters most. So I can absolutely see the value add here for sure. and such an exciting time to be coming because this technology is so new but ultimately so useful, but also so much potential to continue advancing, literally like you were referencing there. I mean, just from your perspective, what's got you excited in your eyes if people and companies and security practitioners are adopting vendors like Beacon to the absolute maximum kind of potential? What is the next 6, 12, 18 months going to look like from a security team's perspective?
So our roadmap is really focused on solving problems and the user flows. And we have the human users and we have the agents users. And we're investing a lot in AX. So in 6 months, what user will be able to do is really to defend the organization at scale. So we'll have the entire constructs for running a SecOps program inside Beacon, like from data collection, visibility to detection engineering, investigation, hunting, and so on. So you'll have that, and it's not going to be like a replicate of what we already had. It's going to be a new thing that's based on new principles of really the right data approach. We believe how you leverage agents, where do you leverage them, where you don't leverage them. So we're building this really from scratch in a way that we believe leverages today's technology. So you'll be able to have that, which is ultimately the control and ownership of your really the security program. So that's in 6 months. And I think as you're talking about the longer period, so I'm a product guy for a long time now. So I always had those yearly roadmap, 3 year, 5 years. So I think now in the age of AI, it's really hard to predict exactly. And the ecosystem around us really matters. I think our guiding principles for these horizons is to always be investing and to always be the leading data layer for security teams. So we'll always be looking for what types of data problems can we solve for defenders, what types of modern ways of thinking or tooling or AI can we embed in that in a way that makes security teams' lives a bit easier. And I'll just give you an example. I think that in 12 months or 18 months, I think we'll be seeing a shift from today we're using just agents. So Beacon has this hunting agent and we have this security for AI agents. So we have these agents, but I think where we're going in the industry is to have not just autonomous agents, but autonomous systems. How does a system of agents look like, right? And today we're bridging the gaps as humans. We're like the glue. And myself as a secure engineer, I'm the glue between the data coverage agent that Beacon provides to me and the hunting agent. And obviously they're connected, right? Because something bad happened, the threat actor did something bad, then we need to understand what systems are affected. Not all of these systems have the logs in my SIM or whatever. So you need to find that. So there's an interaction, and we are the glue, the human beings. So where we're going with Beacon is to make it more autonomous in a way that you have fleets of agents that interact with themselves, and potentially you have hundreds of agents for a task. As a human, you're not even like fully aware to like their like specific conversation, but you do get to have the oversight. You do have access to all the traces, and you do have your way to really influence what this system is doing for you, which is always improving and always getting to a higher autonomous level.
Let's be honest, it sounds like an exciting future ahead of us. But ultimately, I think for the immediate right now as well, the fact that there's something like Beacon that's coming out here that's ultimately just making people's lives significantly easier is why wouldn't you want to have that? You must go on those calls and be like, so this is a no-brainer for you. But it's honestly, oh, this has been unbelievable to unpack. And I feel like something we could probably continue talking about for quite some time because it's a huge part of the industry, but it's a really big problem right now that I think there's definitely a lot of recognition there as to why this needs solving. Thank you so much for joining me. This has honestly been a fantastic conversation. Anybody that's been tuning in, make sure to like, subscribe, share this episode with your peers. Of course, make sure to also get connected with Or and the team over at Beacon Security. As you can probably tell from the episode, there is so much excitement in this right now, but I think when you're being recognized on the rising cyber kind of recognition, I think that's a real demonstration of the value add piece there. But again, all thank you so much for joining, and I will see you all next time for more conversations that are shaping cyber.